Senator Seiwert.
Consideration's been given to the power this puts in the hands of employers to use coercive intimidation, bullying and threats to a job seeker, and I'm thinking in particular women, to take a job in poor circumstances because they'll be dobbed in. And how are you going to stop it?
Yeah, look, I think we do need to set up a process that permits us, as I said, to initially do some screening and due diligence, and that is what we're working on.
Of what? This is before an employer gets to you. They can use the very threat that they can be dobbed in to harass, bully.
Senator Seiwert, there already is the National Customer Service line. That situation could occur now. It's not going to happen because an employer...
You're adding an extra threat level in here.
No,
with this line.
I disagree with you because job seekers can already call the job seeker line to actually complain of any behaviour that they may be subject to.
But somebody's going to be so intimidated that they'll get dobbed in, that they can be harassed, they'll lose their payment. This is the real world that we live in.
There has to be a process that is gone through before that decision is made.
That's right. And in terms of somebody getting to a financial penalty stage, but
there's a power imbalance here.
Absolutely.
But don't you? I'm just really staggered that you don't get the power imbalance that's here for a vulnerable person who's living on a small amount of money. And I've been prosecuting that argument next door, so I won't do it again. But you know very well it's going. The payment's going down. You've got someone who's desperately looking for work, who's vulnerable, who desperately needs a job and desperately doesn't need to lose the job seeker payment. They probably don't know all of this process that you've been talking about. What they know about is that they can be dobbed in for not taking a job, for refusing a job.
But they also know that they themselves have a pathway that they can action in that event.
Minister, I talk to people in this situation all the time in terms of being vulnerable and looking for work. They often do not know their rights. They don't know about the complaints line. And as I understand it, very few people actually do use it. And I'll come back to that issue in a minute. So people are going to be, in the real world, in vulnerable positions. So what are you doing? And I appreciate, Ms Shannon, what you've just said about the process going through, but this is way before you go through those checks where they may lose the job seeker payment. All they know is if they refuse a job, they'll get dobbed in.
And so I guess what we would say is in terms, going back to what you were saying in terms of what the process is, especially for vulnerable people, there's a range of support and processes available to support vulnerable people, to make sure that vulnerable people are not financially penalised for things that are outside of their control. And so there's, some of the things that can happen are that, in terms of what their job search requirements are, they can be adjusted down to make allowances for people's vulnerabilities. So
there's vulnerable, that are identified vulnerable, and there's people that are vulnerable even though they're not. If you're a young woman in a power imbalance, you are vulnerable.
Well, maybe the government will just have to do its best to protect them from their minister's silly ideas.
Senator, perhaps if I could suggest that when the department finalises the material on the website related to the employer reporting line, because your point is to the information that's available to job seekers about the process and the protections that we are building into that process, that we can actually reference that and provide some public-facing advice to job seekers so that they understand that there is a process that is being followed, and that if they are connected with a provider and they're concerned about the behaviour of an employer, such as that you outlined, that they have that they should be raising it with their provider, and if they're not satisfied that their provider is assisting them with that concern, I'm more than happy to make sure that the National Customer Service line number is
if they're complicit with pushing that person into a job. I don't think that's reasonable.
Hang on. Sorry.
Senators, many of those processes exist, and I take your point. The current landscape means that we have to all try harder around the communication to be able to voice, particularly those power imbalances that you've spoken to. I think that's really important. I think, as Ms Shannon's outlined, if we can do more to communicate that direct to clients that are on online and indeed with job active providers, we should do that. We take a responsibility as a department really high to ensure that people are well informed. I think the other thing that you've talked about and the Minister has raised is the National Customer Service Line, an incredible place where people can come and talk about issues that they have, and that's an important part. And we need to do the due diligence on all the information we receive. And if there are any cases that you're aware of where you feel as though there has been that in place, I'm more than happy to follow up, Senator, for you.